Ryu wins!
Captain Forest here, and in today's video, I'm going to be power scaling Ryu from Street Fighter. Now if you guys are new to my channel, please leave a like, comment down below, and of course subscribe for the content. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead, get right into meat potato things and talk about some of Ryu's scaling. Now, before I get onto stats, however, I must address the most common question in the community: is the Street Fighter comics canon? Well, yes and no. Don't worry folks, you will all understand as I break it down in this video. So I took it upon myself to talk to the writer, illustrator and editor for the Udon comics, Matt Moylan, to gather some information. Matt Moylan himself states that Capcom gives him information and him and his team decide how to use this information. They also did this with the Darkstalkers comic too. Both Street Fighter and the Darkstalkers comics are their own continuity separate from the games, but the games are the main inspiration. The characters from the comics are the same characters with the same personalities, but go on to have different adventures, or the same adventures like in the games, but rearranged in a different way. Essentially, what Matt Moylan was doing was basically fixing the issues that the games version of the story had. Some parts of the game's continuity didn't make sense, such as some of the events in the Street Fighter Alpha games, and there are a lot of what ifs, and some of them could not be true, which is why in the comics those events were written out differently. Even so, some of the games and the feats from some of the Street Fighter characters are non-canon, which makes things even more of a mess when it comes to the certain scaling routes. However, Matt Moylan confirms that the characters in the comic book have the same powers and skills as the game versions, but also have their own abilities unique to themselves, such as Ryu's Shin Ryu form and its unique abilities, and Chun-Li's use of the dark arts, which is not by her game counterpart. So essentially, yes, if I was to use, for example, Akuma from the comic books, I can use all of his hacks and abilities and skill feats that he has shown in the game version. The issue is, I cannot use any of the AP or speed feats from the games to apply to the comic book characters, and vice versa, and the game counterparts can't use any new feats or abilities from the comics as I mentioned, which is why when I use the game and comic book feats, the AP and speed feats I use only come from the comic books, which they do have better feats in comparison to the game versions, and I use the hacks and abilities from the games to the comics. So just be careful and be specific on what you're using when it comes to the Street Fighter scaling. But anyway, now that I've clarified this huge information, this should hopefully cover some grey area, hopefully give you guys more of an answer so people can stop asking me now. But anyway, just refer back to this video and some of these screenshots of course. But anyway, let's get right to meat and potato things. I'm going to go ahead, start off, talk about some of the feats for game Ryu. I'll talk about some feats from the comic books, so it'll be its own kind of composite in its own way. So starting off with game Ryu, in Street Fighter Alpha 3, Bison hooked Ryu to a machine which channeled the power from Ryu's body, which had enough power to destroy a city. There were two calcs done for this feat. One of the calcs was calced around the small city, and the other calc was done for city to city level plus, which is pretty impressive. So even if we use like the lower end for the calc, it's still in like the small city ranges, which is pretty decent. But anyway, there's some really good feats for Ryu. He'd easily upscale from the likes of E Honda, who was able to destroy a meteor. That calc was calced around the ranges of mountain level to mountain level plus to the island level ranges. So game Ryu has some pretty decent AP feats to the small city level, to city level plus, and ranging up to the mountains to the island level, which is pretty impressive. Now moving on to speed, now easily Ryu himself would scale above the likes of Sagat, Zangief, and Korin. Sagat was able to blitz Rupo. This feat was calced around the high hypersonic ranges of speed. The ruler's staying hand, a move that can travel up to 12,000 kilometers. This was calced around the Mach 588, aka massively hypersonic, and Ryu naturally would scale above these characters, so he would scale to these speed ranges. Alright folks, that's going to conclude game Ryu's feats. I'm going to go ahead and talk about comic book Ryu and what he's shown. Ryu was able to physically damage Akuma. This very same Akuma was able to destroy Bison in their 1v1 match, and this very same Bison performs a feat where his energy was used to charge up a satellite, and this satellite was able to fire a giant laser which destroys a huge terrain. This was calced around the 504 gigatons, aka large island level, which is very impressive for comic book Ryu. However, this is nothing in comparison to what Ryu performs later on in the comics. Ryu takes on a new power and a form called Shinryu. This form is a dualistic combination of the power of nothingness and the Satsui no Hado. This power would also become part of Ryu's base form. Shinryu was able to defeat Gil and banish him with the raging demon. This very same Gil is able to hold open Jedda's universe, which Jeddah himself created from his own blood and flesh, which this own universe has its own space-time continuum. This would put Ryu in the universal ranges of attack potency. We can also get Ryu higher, folks. Did I mention about the feat with Akuma defeating Bison? Well folks, there is more to Bison than meets the eye. You see, Bison can also tap into the secret powers of soul power, which is a spiritual power that permeates the entire universe. Bison is able to master the use of the soul power, which he manifested and altered into the evil form, which is called Psycho Power. The Street Fighter universe is infinite in size, as confirmed by Dhalsim, so essentially Bison is tapping into this universal power, and easily Ryu would scale to all of this based off the feats that I've shown and the upscaling, so you can get Ryu to the high universal ranges of attack potency. So that's going to round up comic book Ryu and his AP feats. I'm going to quickly move over to speed. Easily some low end speed feats. So you have 2 lightning timer feats. There's one with Alex where he was able to react to lightning and quickly throw one of the characters into Necro's lightning. And then you have a character like Kami who's able to react and dodge Necro's lightning and punch him in his face. Ryu, of course, inverse wise, would naturally scale above both these characters and would scale to those levels of speed. Now there's some higher end speed stuff. There is an inaccessible speed feat where Jeddah himself was able to move outside of space and time and take complete control over his blood and form. This very same Jeddah gets tagged by Chun-Li, and this very same Chun-Li goes at it with Ryu, and Ryu is able to react to Chun-Li's attacks, and it's confirmed that she retained her amps during the Street Fighter vs Darkstalker comic crossover, which is canon to the Street Fighter comics. So with this chain scaling, this bunks Ryu to the inaccessible levels of speed, which is very impressive. So that's going to round up both game and comic book Ryu and their stats. I'm going to go ahead, move over and talk about his hacks and abilities. So Ryu has mastered the ancient art of Anatsukan. Ryu has also fought and defeated Seth, who has all the combat data and abilities of every single martial artist in the series, and Seth also has absorbed countless amounts of combat data and has accumulated knowledge equivalent to hundreds of fighters. Ryu was able to fight on par with Akuma, and he was able to get the upper hand in skill. He's actually defeated Akuma as well. The same Akuma has transcended all forms of martial arts, and with this level of skill, Ryu scales above a lot of other characters who are experts, if not masters, at their own respective fighting styles. Now, let's work our way up and talk about the powers and abilities of what Ryu possesses. Ryu can also smell your killing intent and the presence of Kage, such as smelling his bloodlust, and Kage is literally just a shadow. So Ryu has some really good awareness, even in base. He has some really good awareness. Ryu also has precognition. His mind's eye allows him to anticipate attacks and parry them, and then follow up with a counterattack. Ryu is able to use energy absorption. He can absorb chi. He can absorb the Satsui no Hado, which is very impressive. Ryu can also throw out his Hadoukens, which are physical, spiritual, and mental. Ryu can manipulate the changes in the his elemental attacks. He can change the elements in his chi attacks, so he can use lightning Hadoukens, and he can also throw out fire Hadoukens too. And as mentioned above, chi in Street Fighter is physical, spiritual, and mental in nature, which was stated by Seth, of course, and also shown too. And chi users in Street Fighter have passive sensory, so they can pretty much sense like a power level of someone if they have chi, which is pretty good. Akuma also states that Ryu's chi control has grown, showing that Ryu has mastered his control over chi, and Ryu can tell and sense if someone has chi within their body, as Ryu recognized that Guile literally was a fake and was soulless and had no chi. So let's talk about evil Ryu. Now, by giving it the Satsui no Hado, he gains different powers, such as the Raging Demon, which attacks the soul. It also BFRs it too, which is very impressive. The Satsui no Hado also gives the user the ability to teleport, so he would also be able to use the demon teleportation too. So moving on, so pretty much I'm going to talk about the power of nothingness, which is another form that he has, which is really impressive. Now, the power of nothingness gives Ryu an in-tuned level of instinctive reaction and cosmic awareness, as it states that the power of nothingness is a state of consciousness transcending ordinary perspective, born through spiritual and mental refinement, bearing common traits with states being within the Buddhism, martial arts, and spiritual perfection. It is the power to act without being attached to emotion and thought, free of fear, anger, pride, and ego, to draw upon the contents of one's heart intuitively without obstacle or hesitation, and to be aware of the world and to know one's place and meaning within its vastness, to flow with all of creation without the need of worry, desire, or doubt. So it's like a state of oneness. It's kind of like the Master Ultra Instinct in a way. So that's very impressive for the power of nothingness. With the power of nothingness, Ryu's able to do like crazy stuff with his chi. He has like time manipulation. In the power of nothingness state, he can freeze time around his opponents by throwing a Hadouken at them. He can even freeze them in it too. He can also parry and stun and incapacitate his foe to follow up with a finishing blow. And lastly, onto his dual transformation, which is Shin Ryu. So Ryu mastered both dualities of the Satsui no Hado and power of nothingness, so much so that he made Akuma, who is more experienced in using the Satsui no Hado at the time, look like a complete joke. Essentially, he merged the Satsui no Hado and the power of nothingness into his base, kind of like what Goku did in Dragon Ball with the God Ki, which is very impressive. And in this form, Ryu can use his dual killing technique to destroy his opponent's soul and BFR it, as he did to Gil. Ryu can also tap into this form whenever he wants, which is very impressive. Now, once Ryu mastered both dualities, Ryu can use any of the abilities that the power of nothingness or the Satsui no Hado contain, with becoming a part of Ryu's base, such as the teleportation technique. So he can use that with the Shin Ryu form. So he can use like both abilities simultaneously, which is very impressive. And lastly, Ryu can also create chi barriers as well to block out attacks. Okay, so that's going to round up his abilities just quickly in terms of like resistances. Ryu himself, he can dawn upon and resist the corruption of the Satsui no Hado, which affects you physically, spiritually, mentally. And Ryu himself can also endure and take chi attacks, which also affect you on these levels. So Ryu has some pretty decent resistances. But anyway, overall, Ryu is pretty impressive, even in the game and comic book variants, easily ranging for the game version of Ryu to the small city level, the city level plus ranges. You can get him to mountain and up into the island level ranges, and as for speed, easily getting him to the high hypersonic ranges and the massively hypersonic ranges as well, which is pretty impressive. As for the comic book version, a lot more powerful than his game version variant, so you can get him to large island, to the universal to high universal levels of attack potency. And as for speed, he also has some massively hypersonic speed and some inaccessible arguments as well. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoy Street Fighter content, please leave a like, comment down below, and of course subscribe for the content. It's been real. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.